Welcome to Plugged In, a podcast by OREMC about our co-op, our community, and our shared connections. I'm your host, Michelle Hutchins, Director of Communications and Marketing at OREMC. And joining me today is our Manager of Finance, Eric Dyal. Eric, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Today, our topic is understanding cost of service. Often when we have changes in rates, whether up and or down, although they don't tend to trend down too much, unfortunately, just because things keep increasing in cost. It's always a good time to maybe better explain what makes up rates, what the breakdown is, and what causes those changes or fluctuations, because they can go down.
Sure.
A little bit, just so our members better understand what is driving that. We know it's frustrating for sure, because costs in general across the board, no matter what the service, groceries, fuel, travel, cost of building a home, appliances, any of that has continued to trend upward. So one more thing is not exactly what people
That's right.
want to hear about, but so what drives some of those costs? And we'll break them down a little bit more in the conversation. But for us, it's materials and labor, meaning the equipment that we purchase to build our system, the poles, the wires, the transformers, and the labor costs that go into manufacturing those.
That's right.
Add in then system improvement of our own, where we are building out and implementing new technologies that come in to enhance our reliability and just growth in general. We, as a co-op, have continued to grow residentially, and those new services expand our system. And then finally, cost of power, which will break down a little bit. But why don't we start, Eric, with the different components that make up our rate structure? There are four.
Yeah, we got four basic structures. The first one is the fixed facility fee. Essentially, that's a fee that is exactly what it says. It's a revenue mechanism meant to help us recover our fixed cost in providing power to our members. And
I think it's hard for members to understand because I know member services sometimes get calls that says, well, I didn't use any power. I wasn't home. I was away. I was on vacation.
Right.
Why do I have a charge, a monthly charge? And it's for the very reason so that when you come home and you're ready to flip on the lights,
reliable power,
that you've got that power standing and at the ready, because the fact of having it available, it costs money to build those poles or to set those poles, string those wires, put in the transformer.
Run the service to the house. Yeah, but it takes capital to do that, and it takes capital to maintain that, quite frankly. So,
and on one hand, when it comes to the basic facilities charge, as we say over time, the purpose of it is to recover more of those fixed cost of being able to flip on the lights and have power when you want it.
Right.
And on one hand, appliances, which typically account for some of the biggest electrical usage, have gotten more efficient over time.
Sure.
So actually use less than appliances of, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, your heating and air conditioner system is one of the largest users of appliances, and as your older units are replaced, become more efficient, sure, they definitely use less energy.
So we need to be able to recover more of those costs without being dependent on actual usage. Now, on the flip side of that is the Internet of Things actually has us relying more on power and plugging in more things in order to work. So it's kind of which is more dependent on having that power when you want it, when you need it.
That's right.
So it's recovering those fixed costs. So there's, whether you use any power or not, whether you have any kilowatt hour usage or not on any given month, you will have that monthly basic facilities charge on your bill.
Sure, it's no different than your internet service provider, or if you have a house phone or cell phone these days. Whether you use any minutes or not, or turn on your TV or your computer, you're going to pay for that service regardless. So we're very similar to that.
Yeah, good example. So what's the next component of our rates?
The energy charge. So the energy per kWh charge would be the next charge, and that's really a charge designed to recover our operating cost, to help build out these new facilities for our operating needs, basically.
But it's based on actually how much energy you use.
Yes.
Yes, the energy
right.
charge is a reflection of that.
That is correct, yes.
So whether and I think what we've said, our average monthly residential usage averaged out across the year is about 1,427 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but some people use significantly less.
Sure.
Some people use somewhat more.
Mm-hmm.
But it reflects your actual usage that went through the meter installed on your home.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So that's really strictly dependent on your usage.
Yeah.
So the next component is the wholesale power adjustment. And this is one members may be a little more familiar with because we did have to do a wholesale power cost adjustment in around the time Russia invaded Ukraine because it significantly impacted natural gas prices. Yep. So why don't you explain that a little bit more?
Well, during that time, we have several sources of power and generation, natural gas being one of them. And when we had a spike in natural gas prices, that affected the prices that we paid for the power that was generated that we purchased. So
a price well beyond budget.
Yes, that is very, very true.
And what was it? Triple. Natural gas prices tripled in like a year.
Yeah, and that was very unexpected, obviously. So, and something we did not have in our budget. So, and like us, like many other co-ops, we were in a situation to where we had to implement that wholesale power cost adjustment to make up that increase in price based on demand. So, and then
eventually we were able to adjust it back down.
That's right.
And then there's also times when it can even be a reduction or a negative charge in the sense that it's offsetting and that we can give back.
Yes, if we have budgeted our cost to be a little higher than what we're actually experiencing in the market, certainly we'll adjust that to a negative amount and have a credit on your bill, essentially.
It's an offset.
Offset, yeah.
And I think that's a point we haven't made. We often talk about, our members and, we say it in many of our podcasts, but it's worth repeating here. We are a not-for-profit electric utility. Yeah. So we don't have shareholders. We don't have investors in which to pass cost on to. Our members are our shareholders.
That's
they
right.
are the owners of the company. And when we say not-for-profit, that doesn't mean we don't make a margin of money over cost. But that money is used, and this will lead into our next rate factor, but that money is used to reinvest into the co-op itself, to deal with those system improvements, system enhancements, buying the equipment that we need to maintain the system. But then it's given back.
Yes.
And while this isn't part of the rates per se, it kind of ties in the sense that those when money is reinvested, when margins are reinvested, every member of record in a given year is assigned a capital credit amount or a percentage. And then at a later date, those capital credits are returned. Okay. And so I believe it was, we're on about a 63rd consecutive year of repaying capital credits, which I think is somewhere in the $22.6 million range. Or 26 million.
27 million maybe for consecutively, yeah.
$27 million range.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, that's a significant amount of money. But the point is, it does come back. It doesn't come back tomorrow, but it does come It does come back. Well,
it's used to offset debt, basically. If we can utilize those funds, we don't have to go out into the market and borrow those funds to do essentially what we need to do to our system right now.
So offsetting debt, equity management adjustment. That's another component of our rates.
It is, and it is a new component this time. And it's exactly what it says. It's designed to maintain a certain percentage equity in the company, so the members' own portion of the company is maintained and it's not eroded by debt to keep us, financially sound.
So can we break that down and explain a little bit more? Maybe use like a house example, say. So if you have a $300,000 home you purchase, and you put 20% down, it's
Right.
about $60,000. That is as the homeowner, equity in the home.
That's correct. So when you purchase that home and you put 20% down, you have a 20% equity in that home.
And then
So-
the other 80% or $240,000 is what you
Owe to the
you
bank.
borrow and finance.
That's right.
And so, what is the value of? What is the importance of maintaining a certain level of equity, and what is OREMC's desired level? What makes us the healthiest?
Well, it's a question that doesn't have a correct answer. Every co-op is different, based on their individual needs. For us, our board of directors have decided that 38% is a number that they want to be at. So this mechanism is designed to kind of keep us around that 38% equity mark. It's not something that will trigger if you fall directly off of 38%. We'll have some things in place that once you fall a little bit below it or a little bit above it, we'll start adjusting this rate to kind of get us back towards that 38%. It's not something that happens overnight. It's like turning a ship, so it's something that we'll adjust along as needed to kind of just keep us at that 38%.
So it could go up or down.
Up or down, sure.
As we talked about, similar to a wholesale power cost.
That's right.
Adjustment. So one of the other things about rates, so those are the four components of rates, but then we have rates, summer rates and winter rates. Talk about those and the difference and why.
The main reason we have two separate rates and one for the summer, there tends to be higher usage in the summer just with the where we live at and the heat and the air conditioner systems that they're using. But the reason for the two-tier system is conservation, really. It's to encourage conservation during the times when energy is needed the most.
Which is during the day.
Right. So that's the basic gist behind having a separate rate for the summer.
So and that is so the usage break is at 1,000 kWh.
That's right.
So the winter rate and the summer rate up to 1,000 kWh are the same, but then it goes up a bit, as you said, after 1,000 to encourage conservation. Maybe just dive into this a little bit. Essentially, what we're trying to do is keep from having a peak demand or keeping our peak demand as low as possible.
That's right.
And why is that important?
Just the supply. You've got the generation that is coming in. I mean, the peak is for our system is going to coincide with other users of energy and other co-ops. So you don't want everybody at a super high peak at the same time. And
we estimate based on historical records, we estimate what we expect our peak to be, correct?
Right, yes.
The issue comes in when because of an extreme event, whether it be extreme heat or extreme cold, but in our case, extreme heat, for a longer duration of time causes that peak to go much higher than we expect.
Right.
And that cost of power is more expensive, wholesale power.
Yes, that is correct, because you're having to generate power that was not expected to be generated. So you're having to go into the market and rely on sources that you didn't anticipate having to rely on.
So what does that mean for the average user is, don't run your dishwasher in the middle of the day in the summer. Don't do your laundry in the middle of the day in the summer. And counterintuitively for most people is raise your thermostat so that the air conditioning doesn't run quite as much. And I think we typically say our peak time is between about 2 and 7 p.m. So if some of those activities can be offset to after 7 o'clock or before 2 in the afternoon, then it helps keep that peak demand down.
That's right.
Okay. So that explains the reasoning behind a two-tiered rate structure with summer and winter. Let's go back to the wholesale power cost adjustment. We explained it a little bit, but so we said the wholesale power is driven by the power supply mix that makes up the wholesale power we purchase to then deliver through our system to provide power to our members. It's budgeted for based on pricing and usage and mix, but as you said, it can change.
Yeah, and the change that we had back in 2022, I mean, it was almost solely derived from the price of natural gas. And same thing for the decrease in 23, and that was a direct reflection of what we were seeing in the market for the price of natural gas at that time. We had, because of the spike that we saw in 2022, we had over budgeted a little bit for 2023. That's the
reason for the
decrease. And we had planned to do that anyway in the summer of 23 in July, and decided to actually do it a little bit early because we were seeing those trends take place. So we actually made that change on May 1st as opposed to July 1st. So
it did decrease.
Yeah.
All right. Earlier at the start of this conversation, we talked about what's actually driving the changes, which hopefully will lead into explaining timing. But and I hate to say since COVID, but really it is a marker in time.
That's right.
That basically you can look back to and say it caused a ripple effect. We went from everything shutting down to everything booming, and kind of overnight in both situations.
Right.
But then the necessary labor and people were not there like they were before.
Yeah, I mean, most everybody understands the struggle to hire and retain labor these days, and the cost of that labor has certainly gone up
significantly.
Yeah.
So when we talk about supplies, materials, and labor supplies, what we're talking about is, from a manufacturing standpoint, transformers. We'll use them as an example because they were one of our biggest concerns there for a while in terms of availability of transformers. And why are they concerning to us? I mean, obviously, we have a supply for regular building and maintenance and growth, but we also know that we, are prone to summer thunderstorms and, effects from hurricanes, and we've been very fortunate, but we need to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
So maintaining a strategic, as I call it in SOS, a strategic OREMC stockpile is key. And sometime after COVID, the transformer manufacturers, they couldn't get steel. They couldn't get people to come work. There was such high demand, and everybody was trying to order at the same time that the backlog became 2-3 years out. And the cost skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Again, those costs in materials got passed on to all of us as co-ops and other utilities across the country, and what we had to pay for these supplies.
That's right. And you have to be strategic in your stockpile, like you mentioned. I mean, certainly you want to have something in your inventory, but you kind of have to balance that out with what your need is, and it becomes a little bit more tricky with Okefenokee with us. Like you mentioned earlier, we do have growth on our system, continuing to grow, probably a little more than we had anticipated, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, but it costs capital to do that, and when you're having to purchase more than anticipated supplies during a time when materials are triple the price, it certainly takes an impact on your rates and your financials and everything else.
Everything else. Well, then add into that one of the other drivers. We said we talked about cost of power. We've kind of talked that pretty significantly. I guess one of the things we haven't said about power per se is we talked a lot about natural gas, which does account for about 65% of our power supply. But we have other sources of power in our mix as well. You want to talk about what a couple of those are?
We do. Well, we have several. We've got got nuclear, got solar right now. Solar's a big thing that's continuing to increase. Of course, you got Vogels 3 and 4 that are coming online that have been invested into not only by us but many others. But certainly with the overruns at those facilities, the cost have increased there. So.
We've got some coal, believe it or not.
Do have some coal that is being decreased over time. Forced by regulation.
Right.
A lot of it. So.
And a little bit of other renewable. Our other renewable is hydro. There is some hydro that we purchase. So there's a mix, but with natural gas fluctuations, although those have seemed to go down and level off, but like you mentioned, nuclear and Vogel's unit 3's been online now for almost a year.
That's right. Yeah.
And 4 is coming online.
Pretty fairly soon. Now, the date may have changed, but it's around this time, next 3 months, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. So, but the other component of driving, cost of service, if you will, is technology and the growth of the system. So we've talked about growth of the system, but the other issue is, how power is delivered has really not changed from its infancy, if you will.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say that's right, but the way it's delivered has not changed a lot, but our system itself has in terms of reliability and the technology, like you mentioned, that we can put on our system with downline devices and sectionalizing our system to essentially reduce the number of members out at any given time and reduce the number of minutes that those members are out. So with that technology and us increasing that reliability, it's costly as well.
I think in one of our other podcasts, we talked about the fact that obviously 0 would be the ultimate goal in outages,
Sure.
but unfortunately, that's not a realistic expectation. It not with forces we cannot control.
That's right.
Mother Nature being chief among them.
Yeah, and for the most part, I don't remember the exact number, but it's north of 99% of the time. When you go to turn your light switch on, it's going to come on. So, and that's something that we continue to drive on and to and push. And quite frankly, that's is our number one strategic goal is reliability. So
yes. So while how power is delivered hasn't changed, the technology that we can use on the system has advanced and allowed us to strive for, when there is a power disruption, the fewest number of people for the shortest amount of time.
That's right.
So, and as we said, everything costs money.
Yes.
So rates don't just change because they need to change. It's not like, we're going to raise rates. There is a ongoing evaluation of what are our costs, what is our revenue, and how do those match up. So when there is, aside from, say, something as drastic as a tripling of the cost of natural gas, but just regular growth of a system, we do rate studies on a fairly regular basis. And that, you want to explain that a little bit more?
I can talk about it a little bit. I mean, this is something that's not new. It is part of our strategic plan. As far as I can remember, it's even back in 2012 we started doing this every 2 years. So we've continued to do that every 2 years. 2020 was the last one up until now, but it kind of just in general we try and look at that every 2 to 3 years. Of course, it's been 3.5 years since we last implemented any kind of rate change. But that is part of our overall plan. To look at that, to make sure that we're not undercharging a member or overcharging a member, because certainly you don't want to get in a situation where you're not looking at that and you're overcharging the member and not adjusting for it as well. So it can go both ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think up to 2020, for almost a decade, we were revenue neutral.
That's
meaning
right.
we were kind of just steady Eddie and things were right where they needed to be.
Yep, 2020 was the first non-revenue neutral change that we've had since 2012, and it may be before that, but that's what I'm aware of. And then this last one for 20 that we're about to implement now in 2024. So you've had two essentially since 2012.
And through this conversation, though, we've kind of hopefully laid the groundwork for better understanding as to what makes up your rate. There is a lot of components. Yes, right. It's the actual poles and wires, and if you will, but everything that goes into building that has a cost, and reliability has a cost, and growth and the cost of power changes and fluctuates, and and those costs get passed through to us, which get passed on. So there's a lot of elements to it, I understand, but conversations like these are intended to kind of help our members just get a better sense of what's feeding their rates, and that because we don't have shareholders, as I say once again, we don't have anyone to pass costs on to.
Right.
And we're very diligent in trying to minimize the overall cost and impact so that, we understand. People don't like change.
Right. Yep, that's true.
We understand that, but we also know that when you turn on that light switch, you want to be able to have power.
That's right.
Well, Eric, thank you very much. I hopefully we've helped unmuddy the waters about what makes up cost of service, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.